Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for the latest episode of Missions Talk. My name is Mike Falkenstein. I direct a ministry called 1-8 Catalyst, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Steve Shermer. And Steve, we're getting into the spring slowly. And from what I see on social media, things are kind of warming up for you guys there, aren't they?
They did warm up and then they got cold again. So,
Oh, really? So it's kind of a
yeah.
back and
So, in
forth.
fact, tomorrow morning we're going to wake up below freezing.
Oh, wow, really?
So, yeah, the trees blossomed, the pollen went everywhere. My titanium looking car is now yellow. And, but yeah, we're waking up to freezing temperatures in the morning and for the next
Wow.
several days. So, winter decided to make a U-turn.
It's like, hey, I'm not done. I'm not done yet, huh?
Yeah, I know.
That's
We got so
great.
used to the warmth, and suddenly I'm like, "Ugh," if we walk outside to go to church yesterday. My son wearing shorts, not realizing how cold it was.
Oh, right.
Um, yeah, winter, spring in South Carolina.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And here in Colorado, we have not gotten the warm weather yet, so we're still kind of waiting for that. And
You just had
um,
snow, didn't you?
yeah, we've had some snow. Seems like the last month, it's like one day a week we're getting some snow. So it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of trying to hang on as well. And so, of course, for us, the big thing is that my house sits just above, it's right at about 6,000 feet above sea level. So at that elevation, the weather gets really wonky. It can just change very quickly, and so we're kind of been cold and it snows, and so yeah, we're excited about the warmer weather as well. So anyway, well, so Steve, we have an important episode today. Of course, in the news, we've seen what has happened with a earthquake situation both in Turkey and Syria, and I know that your ministry has been involved in all of that, and so we wanted to kind of bring that to the viewing audience, and as a way to let people know exactly what's happening there. And so, why don't you just start us off, Steve, and give us kind of an idea of the situation today in Turkey and Syria with the earthquake and kind of the aftermath?
Yeah, so it's been over a month since the first earthquake hit on February 6th. I think it was a 7.8, and then that few hours later there was a second one at 7.5,
Hmm.
and subsequently there's been probably three or four more official earthquakes, uh, coupled with over probably by now 12,000 aftershocks
Wow.
just in the last month. I think they were estimating uh, 600 to 900 aftershocks a day at one point.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty intense. And of course, this is probably the first time you and I have been able to sit down to even have this discussion like this
Hmm.
to share what's going on, just because when that happened, it just the ball started rolling with me and just getting things going. So basically, where it stands now in terms of the situation in Turkey and Syria, because Syria is involved as well, is there's a total of over 53,000 people confirmed dead, um,
Wow.
and probably just as many people missing still today. I read one report where it said 680,000 homes were destroyed in
Wow.
this earthquake. 100 and I'm trying to think, over 150,000 structures, I think it was, or somewhere in that. Regardless, if it's a little less, it's still a lot.
That is a
And
lot.
that includes structures that collapsed during the earthquake, as we saw, as well as structures that were so badly damaged that they're going to have to be demolished and they're not inhabitable anymore.
Wow.
So, it in some towns where the epicenters were at were pretty much destroyed. And so the area had probably somewhere between 3 and 5 million. I can't remember exactly number of people I read somewhere where 2 million people have left the region, that the earthquake zone, for other parts of
Okay.
Turkey, other parts of Syria, to basically restart their lives, whether they had family members somewhere else or friends or something, and they just had the means to do it. Well, 1.5 million people are still left behind,
Wow.
and they either don't want to go or they don't have anywhere to go, and their entire family was in those areas, and so they're now inherently homeless,
Mm.
with nothing. I mean, if any of them have been able to get into their homes, it was to salvage whatever little that wasn't destroyed, which wasn't very much. Even one person was able to salvage a toilet, of all things, or
Oh,
at least find one. So they made a makeshift toilet outside, so they could do their business,
all right.
without having to just squat on the street or something out in the middle of nowhere. So, I mean, people are getting really creative. So I mean, overall, it's really bad. We were not originally going to get involved, but I met a Palestinian couple who are missionaries in the region. A couple of years ago, we stayed in contact, met several times, and in the process of learning about the earthquake and the situation, of just trying to garner prayer for the situation that was going on, they referred me to one of the pastors they work with, which is a Syrian pastor. And so I connected with him. And as we started
Okay.
communicating, I started learning about their plan and what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're holding people accountable with the finances. And I mean, it was just, they were really meticulous in what they were doing. I was completely impressed by it.
That's great.
Ended up talking with some other Western missionaries who knew this pastor, who could affirm his integrity. And so we jumped in knowing that most of the aid was going to help the Turkish people, and they needed help as well. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't help them. But the
Right.
reality was, for multiple reasons, the Syrian people were not getting, either not getting aid at all. Aid was being taken in Syria, or those in Turkey were just not getting as much of the aid that they needed, and in some cases, not getting it at all. So we wanted to step up because we wanted to help specifically the Syrian people that were affected. So we jumped in. I went to the region. I met with the pastor, met with several people, started the ball rolling. It's been amazing to see the people that have been giving, and and just how people have responded to this. And so, we've been able to buy tents and blankets and clothing and all kinds of stuff for these people. We originally set out to help just 40 families,
Mm.
and I think we're up to 128 right now, and there's more on the
That's
horizon that are
awesome.
being helped. And so,
That's
on
great.
one end, we don't like the devastation. We hate the devastation.
Mm-hmm.
But we're thankful that God has been providing, that we could help those who are affected, who are mourning, people who literally lost everything. And if you think about the Syrians, just to highlight them, a lot of the Syrians in Turkey were refugees. So when the civil war started in Syria, they lost everything and had to leave everything behind to start a new life in Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, or Iraq. And now those who were in Turkey specifically, lost, literally started over 10 years or less ago, and now they're starting over again.
Okay.
Some, I know for a fact that some made it to the eastern side of Turkey, and when people were helping them, all they had was the pajamas that they ran out the door with.
Mm.
That's all they have left when they
Wow.
arrived. And so there's a lot of effort with this church and his network, including this Palestinian family and their friends, of how do we serve, how do we help. So we've gotten involved. We've sent a team to the earthquake zone last week, as well as to other places. Before that, we're sending another team soon to the region. Not going to say where, but to the region to help
Mm.
also further do some more work with relief efforts. And so I'm just thankful that we've been able to. Now the train's here, if you can hear it. Our
Yeah.
our faithful train who likes to show up at a moment's notice. So, anyways, that's where we're stand right now. Kind of a 36,000 foot view of what's happening.
Okay, so just a quick clarifying question that I know is on my mind, so it's probably on others that are watching as well. The earthquake, did it happen? Is there an earthquake in Syria and a earthquake also in Turkey? Was it the same earthquake,
Hmm.
or is it just Syrians that are now in Turkey that are affected? Or, I mean, are there cities in both countries that are affected?
Sure. So the earthquakes were technically in Turkey, as far as I'm aware. I don't know that there was an actual earthquake in Syria. However,
Okay.
it most of them. There's a fault line. If you look at a map of Turkey, Syria, and Lebanon, there's a fault line that goes kind of the western side of Syria up through the kind of center right of Turkey. And
Okay.
so it's along that fault line where the earthquakes were happening on the Turkish side. But they were so strong, they shook the northern Syria side with just as much power.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so buildings on both sides of the border collapsed. Granted, the majority was in Turkey, but significant damage was done on the northern side of Syria. The building structures were, obviously not up to code. When you look at video of structures that survived the quake, surrounded by buildings that crumbled,
Oh, uh-huh.
those buildings were built to code and they were built to withstand a serious earthquake. In fact, there was one building that was designed by civil engineers.
Mm.
I think it was a government building that's in charge of holding engineers and construction workers accountable. Their building looked like nothing happened to it.
Oh, wow.
All the buildings literally around it crumbled with the
Oh,
quake. And of course, you can read the news. There's a lot of reports going on in Turkey, outside of Turkey, about um, why buildings were not built to code, newer buildings were not built to code, and what happened. So, and in Syria, the civil war, you've got the Syrian government versus the Free Syrian Army fighting each other. So, you know, things are just built because people need a roof over their head. And unfortunately, they just didn't have the means to build quality stuff
oh,
during
okay.
this time.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. So actually, there are areas in both countries that have been affected by this earthquake.
correct.
So the next question, of course, then is, how is the church there responding?
Well, first off, the church in the area is very small. I
Okay.
think Turkey is less than 1% Christian. If I didn't look at the number, but I think it's around that. When I talked to the pastor, the Syrian pastor, and I asked him because I remember having a similar conversation in Jordan. I said, how many Christians are in Syria? And he gave me a figure, and I was a little bit surprised by the figure he gave me. It was a bit higher than I thought it would be. I said, okay, how many of them are actually born again? And he goes, oh, well, that's a different question.
Oh,
And he goes, that's
okay.
probably less than 1%.
Okay.
So he says, just like a pastor I know in Jordan, there's Christians on one hand, and there's believers on the other. They're not equal. And so, so understanding that the church in Turkey and in Syria is not very big, there's only so much they're going to be able to do. They don't have as many resources as outside churches might have. And this church the Syrian pastor runs is they live by faith. I mean, that's pretty much what they do. They have a little bit of money when something happens, it goes out the door because they're trying to help. They had raised a little bit of money before the earthquake for situations like this, not knowing it was around the corner. And I think it was
Oh, okay.
$400. And the moment it hit, that $400 went out the door.
Okay.
But what I've been impressed by, especially this one church that we're connected to, is just how they're responding even without finances. And they are literally walking by faith, going, it's like the 5 loaves and 2 fish scenario.
Oh, wow.
Okay. You have a
That's
little,
great.
but you have to feed a lot. They have very little, but they have hundreds, I mean, they're helping hundreds, but they really need to help thousands or even tens of thousands of people.
Oh, so they could
And
help way more. Yeah.
oh, absolutely. So,
Mhm.
and some of it is in Turkey, it's easier to get aid to people. In Syria, it's more problematic because of the governing authorities that are at war with each other. And so I've been really impressed with this particular church and how they've responded, what they're doing. And so I've also been very happy to see how outside churches have come alongside them. And I know that's happening with probably others as well, but specifically this church of, we've got the resources, let's get them to you. And then they're taking that money and really um, going in there. And it's not just Western. I'm seeing Korean people involved. I'm
Oh,
seeing
great.
Egyptians involved. So and I know of a network of Chinese where hundreds of Chinese got engaged with aid
Oh,
relief
great.
in the region. So it is the global church that is stepping up to come alongside the local church in the region to serve the people who need the help.
Wow. Boy, I sure love to hear that, that there's, churches from around the world that are getting involved. That's really great. And it is, with the my history in China in particular, you mentioned the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time, gosh, it's probably now 10, 15 years ago, where many, many Chinese churches knew they ought to be involved, but literally didn't know how. And so it's great that they're just kind of taking these steps by faith and, being
Mm-hmm.
involved. Because there's need, isn't there,
Absolutely,
around the world.
absolutely.
And so, because for a lot of time, for years, it was kind of like we know we ought to, but we don't know how, and so we won't.
Mm,
And so for them to go, hey, there's a need, and
mm.
we'll step up. So, well, that's great. So, final question. No, second to last question for me, for you, Steve. So as you're assessing the situation and you have kind of um, contacts there and all the stuff that you guys are doing, where's the hope in all of this? What hope do they have as even they see this living in this, really hard situation?
What I've learned in all this and what I've been told, and not by Westerners, okay, this is not coming from a Western source, this is coming from a Syrian source,
Okay.
that this person, this Syrian pastor, has never in his life seen a more openness to the gospel among Syrian people than he's seen right now since the earthquake.
Wow.
And so
Mm.
I hate to use the term silver lining because it is a horrific um, crisis that's still going on. But the reality is there is an openness. They've had so much bad news and they've
Mm.
lived so much of that bad news over the past month that they're open to good news. And good news is, yes, providing blankets and housing and all that. But the greatest of the good news is sharing the gospel with them. And
Praise
so
God.
they're
Yeah.
having incredible conversations. And the way he described it is we don't even have to force anything, it's just happening. The
Mm.
people they're delivering aid to, they want to talk about it. They want to talk about something good, something hopeful.
All
I
right.
don't know what the response is right now to people hearing the gospel, but at the very least, they're talking about it and
Okay.
they want to. And they're inviting this pastor and his people in his church into their homes very freely to sit with them, to have tea, to talk, to get to know each other, and they're hearing the gospel. So,
Mm.
in that respect, there is something positive in this. Um, Um, but at the same time, it's always a balancing act between the two. We want to do both, and
That's right.
I believe it's a necessity that we deliver both the physical
That's
aid as
right.
well as the gospel.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because it does turn out that many times in these situations, meeting people's physical needs does lead to a more openness to the gospel, right?
Sure.
And so, um, well, Steve, as you were talking, I was just thinking, it's probably a whole nother episode that we could do. But it is interesting how there are times when there are these disasters, right? Hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, those kinds of
Hmm.
things that happen, which then leads to an openness to the gospel. And so it's almost like many times the human heart needs to be jolted to
Hmm.
kind of out of their comfort zone or something, right? I mean, we could examine that more in another episode, but it is interesting how that does seem to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could say the same thing. I mean, I've never been through an earthquake. I've never been through a significant natural disaster like that. But I do know that times in my life when you feel like the pressure is so intense that you're just ready to give up on life,
Mm-hmm.
that those are the moments where that's, some people don't become open. They just wallow in the tragedy or the crisis
Mm,
that they're in. But
mm-hmm.
for many people, we want to find that hope beyond the crisis, and it's in those moments where we do become more sensitive if we're willing to look and say, okay, there's got to be something better than this crap I'm in. You know,
That's right. Yeah, that's
so
right.
in those moments, we become more open, and when we become more open, we become more sensitive to the gospel. Now, the
Mm.
flip side of that, as believers, it's why it's our responsibility to get the gospel to them, because if we refuse or keep making excuses for why we can't go certain places, well, guess what? Those holes are going to be filled in by something else that we don't want to see people believing, because it
That's
leads
right.
nothing to, it only leads to destruction. So they're going from one path of destruction to another path of destruction.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And if we continue, because I just feel that we just do this too much. Now, I'm not saying we're all called to go everywhere or to do everything,
Right.
but I do believe if we're all moving forward intentionally in the Great Commission, whether that's locally or globally, somehow all those gaps are going to be filled. But the fact that they're not being filled tells me that we're making way too many excuses,
Oh, right.
using our careers as excuses, our families as excuses. I can't take my kids. Well, guess what? I took my kids to Asia,
Mm-hmm.
and I know many
Right.
people who take their kids to Asia and do just fine.
That's
Okay?
right. Yeah.
Yes,
In
I
fact,
can give stories of people who died and were killed and martyred on the field, but they're not a significant percentage of those who ultimately go. We can't use safety as an excuse to not go, because all you have to do is get in your car. And just a few miles away from my house the other day was a major accident on an intersection that's not a major intersection, but everyone in the accident died.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is get in your car to be in danger. All you got to do is
Yeah.
turn on the lights and be in danger, or cook something and be in, you could go on and on. But the
Right.
point is, we got to stop making excuses.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
if we're involved locally, great. I know people who are, and they are fully invested in it.
Mm.
Great. They don't need to be invested in what I'm doing. But I don't find that most Christians are fully invested into much
Oh,
except
right.
their their own life. And
Okay,
that
so
needs to
that leads
change.
then to a final question for those that are watching and they go, wow, I didn't know the need there. These hundreds of thousands of people that have been affected, and they do want to be involved in some ways. What are the kind of the first steps for them to be involved in Turkey and Syria?
Yeah, so on one level, I'm still trying to figure this out. Uh,
Okay.
so Syria itself is not new to us as a ministry. but Syria, in the sense of how we're approaching it right now through this earthquake, is new. The partners are new, so we're still discerning how to approach this
Okay.
on a long term, and hopefully in the near future we'll have I'll have better answers for that. Right now I've got a team going next week, and basically the team is buying a bunch of stuff while they're there. They're bringing in cash to buy things that can't be bought with a credit card, and we're providing the aid materials that can't be bought other ways.
Okay.
Okay, we are we sent as a ministry that team, as I mentioned earlier, spend time with the people who are still there suffering and bringing them things that they don't have money for or don't have access to because there's no stores available. They're all under the rubble as well. So,
Okay.
um, we've looked into things like medical stuff, but that's as far as Turkey's concerned, that's not needed. Turkey seems to do a really good job providing medical care, even to Syrians. I've heard it's top notch in the
Okay.
country. Syria, we're still wrapping our minds of how do we do that, because we are looking at trying to get aid into Syria as well. So
Okay.
we're trying to figure that out and hope we'll find a path soon for that. The reality is sometimes getting aid to these areas, the type of aid that's needed, it it it's expensive to even get it to them. It's not simple to just wire the money over there.
Oh, right.
I've been told that by multiple sources from multiple countries, even local people, that wiring money would actually not be helpful.
Okay.
So
Well, I
we've
mean,
got to, yeah,
yeah, part of that is just because just to tag on that, I'm sure part of it is they need to have I mean, you send the money, but they need to have the actual raw material or the
yeah,
actual need. I mean,
yeah,
you send money for rice, but maybe they don't even have rice there. You'd have to actually get it to them so sometimes it's like a supply chain issue
yeah.
probably.
And the
Like they,
supply chain is part of the aid package. I mean, it's not just giving rice. I mean, you got to have the money to get the rice to them and the vehicles and, you know,
right.
so really right now, the two biggest things, obviously prayer.
Okay.
And, don't take that lightly. Pray for them. Pray for the
Hmm.
aid to get to them. Pray for the money to be given. Pray for the people who are giving it to them. Pray for opportunities, for continued opportunities to share the gospel, because that's
Mm.
critical as well. And of course, giving finances. If someone wants to give through us, it's our website, silkroadcatalyst.com / earthquake relief, all one
Uh,
word.
okay.
And any money we get from that is going the link on that page specifically, any money we get through that link right now is going to the aid products, to the delivery of the aid, whatever it takes to get the aid to the people. And so
Okay.
that's what our team is doing next week, is they're going to be carrying in stuff to purchase aid. Some of the aid items are being bought in one city and taken to another. I mean,
Okay.
in one case, the team that just went to the earthquake zone bought some things in one city and had to fly it with them to the other city.
Okay.
So
Right.
the
Yeah.
logistical process is complex. There's a lot of complexities to it, creativity. So giving and prayer are the top two. We're hoping in the future we can have opportunities for going short term once we find better ways that would be beneficial to them, but it needs to be beneficial and not just doing a mission trip for the sake of a mission trip. Because
Oh, right. Okay, good. Well, a couple of quick thoughts. Obviously, the prayer and giving, they're both tremendous opportunities to be involved. Of course, we know what the power of prayer. Steve, I also sort of think about for your organization, this is kind of when you talk about kind of a hidden blessing. I mean, you're clearly building infrastructure where there wasn't, right, to meet this need. And so, there could be just some cool things in terms of not only for this earthquake opportunity to serve, but then also in the future. In the future, you'll go, oh yeah, we've got our people, and here's this and that, and you'll be ready to go. So even as you're figuring it out, then you will figure it out, and then in the future you'll have more opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
it's neat to see some growth there too. So, well, thanks, Steve, for giving us a update on what's happening in Turkey and Syria. And yeah, for those watching, just continue to be praying. And Steve mentioned this dedicated webpage that his organization has. Please go visit that. Go check out what they're doing. Be sure to, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to share it with others. And we're thankful that you've been with us. And we look forward to having you on the next episode of Missions Talk.